What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over what I think is the current SMG meta, and I'll also be talking about assault rifles that kind of fit in as SMGs right now. Obviously, with Cold War guns, with their high mobility and good ADS times and good TTKs, a lot of the Cold War ARs can make decent SMGs still. So we'll talk about all of that. Also go through all the SMGs and give you what I think are the best for different situations. Give you some recommended builds at the end of the video. But as always, if you guys like the content, consider dropping that like, comment, and sub. Really helps us out, helps us grow, helps us keep the website up to date. I've been grinding on the website. We got all the data today is going to be the most up to date. So everything from the patch pretty much is on the website at this point. We got a few things we're still missing, but most of it's on there at this point. So if you guys want to help us out and help us keep doing that, consider dropping that sub. But let's jump into it, and we're going to start with defining what I think the best ARs are for the SMG category. All right, so I looked through all the ARs pretty much, looked at all their stats, all their TTKs and everything, ADS times, just pretty much all the stats that are important for SMGs, to try to find what I thought would be basically the best SMG AR that you could build right now. And these are the 4 guns I came up with: the Cold War AK, the AS Val, the XM4, and the Groza. The reason the FFAR is not on here is just because I think there's some better options currently. The FFAR's TTKs are a little bit slower than most of these, and it has really bad ADS times now, so it didn't make the list. But it's still a great gun. It's just it didn't make this list just because I think there's some better options. So what I did is I built essentially what I thought would be the best SMG version of each one of these guns, and then we're gonna take the two best guns from this list and put them on the SMG comparison so we can make a full comparison with some of these ARs to some of the SMGs. So the AK-47 build is regular suppressor, so that helps with sprint to fire times, ADS times, bullet velocity. It's just a really good attachment for making ARs more like SMGs now. KGB skeletal stock, that's the Raider stock. So that really helps with sprint to fire times and ADS movement speeds and shooting ADS movement speeds. So that's really good for an ADS build. Microflex, because the Cold War AK has terrible irons, so we get an optic on there. Tiger Team Spotlight, again, this is just to make it more like an SMG, makes you move faster. So the last attachment would be the 45 round mag. We don't have those on the website yet for some of the guns, so we'll get that up there soon. But 45 round mag is plenty with the AK because it shoots pretty slow, down at 600 RPM. So you don't need the 60 round mag, you don't need that ADS penalty. You can just stick with 45. Next up's the AS Val. AS Val obviously has a really small magazine, 30 round mag, but it has insane TTKs and good movement and good ADS times. The TTKs are still the best in the game pretty much, so that's why it made the list. Is pretty much the TTKs combined with the ADS time and the sprint to fire time. With this build, it's great. So 5mm laser helps with hip fire and sprint to fire times. 30 round mag, obviously you just need more bullets. Sleight of hand, because 30 rounds still is not very much, so you get a little bit of reload with sleight of hand. Stable grip tape for sprint to fire times and ADS times. And then operator foregrip, because the AS Val has a ton of vertical recoil. And the reason I choose operator instead of like the Merc foregrip is because the Merc slows you down, and we're trying to build this like an SMG, so we want as much movement speed as possible. Then XM4 suppressor, again, sprint to fire times, bullet velocities, ADS times, all those things. Great attachment to make an AR like an SMG. Tiger Team Spotlight to make you move faster, make your ADS movement speed faster as well, because we're trying to make it like an SMG. 60 round mag, you could potentially get away with a 45 round mag here. If you're playing solos, duos, trios, maybe 45 round mag, but I tend to like the 60. I think it's maybe worth the extra penalty to your ADS time to use the 60 round mag. Airborne elastic wrap, this is to try to bring those ADS times back down. Unfortunately, this hurts your sprint to fire times. So really, if you could run 45 round mag and swap out airborne elastic for maybe an optic or something. I don't love the irons in the XM4, so I think that would be another really good build. But that would bring your ADS times down a little bit, and it wouldn't hurt your sprint to fire times. So that would be a good change to make if you can stand running the 45 round mag. And then the last attachment's the Raider stock. Again, that's for, sprint to fire times, strafe speed, ADS strafe speed, ADS shooting movement speed. It's just a great attachment for an SMG AR. And then Groza is going to be the exact same build as the XM4, literally the same. So everything I said for the XM4 holds true for the Groza. But let's jump down and look at these stats real quick. So fire rate, higher fire rate is usually better. The 1+ to a lower fire rate is that it conserves ammo, so that's why we can get away with the 45 round mag on the Cold War AK, because it only has 600 RPM. ASVAL, super high RPM, and the reason that high RPM is good is because it causes flinch, and it makes it harder for your enemy to hit you if you're flinching them over and over, and it's more forgiving. If you go off your target for just a split second, if you have a really slow fire rate gun, then there's a bigger delay in how long it takes for the next bullet to hit them, which causes a bigger increase in TTK. So that's kind of why people talk about forgiveness with high RPM guns. ADS times, they're all pretty similar here. The two that come out on top are the ASVAL and the Groza, which are pretty close to, these are pretty normal SMG ADS times, so those will be pretty good. Sprint to fire times, Cold War AK comes out on top of sprint to fire times, and this is because we don't have that airborne elastic wrap that the Groza and the XM4 have, because we didn't have the big mag, so we didn't have to slow our ADS times down. So sprint to fire times, Cold War AK is going to come out on top with that KGB skeletal stock. Tactical sprint to fire, this is when you do your auto tac sprint or just tac sprint in general. ASVAL actually comes out on top here, followed by the Cold War AK. And again, this is because of that airborne elastic wrap that the XM4 and the Groza lose. Movement speed's super important for SMGs, and Cold War guns excel at this. So pretty much all three of the Cold War guns are going to have great movement speeds. The XM4 and the Groza come out on top as far as ADS movement speed, but they're all about the same for just regular movement speed. But the XM4 and the Groza are basically SMG speed with these attachments, so that's really good. That's kind of our goal, is to get to like making it like an SMG. ASVAL is okay, but just a little bit slower, just because it's a modern warfare gun. What else is important on here? Hipfire. So pretty much all of the Cold War assault rifle guns can't really be hip fired, because you really need that Raider stock, which that helps with your sprint to fire, which is why it's so important for an SMG build. So that kills your hip fire. So really you can't build a hip fire build for any of the Cold War ARs, which is unfortunate. But the ASVAL actually you sort of do with this build, because you have the 5mm laser and you don't have anything on there that hurts it. So ASVAL easily is going to have the best hip fire, but because you only have 30 bullets, it's really hard to hip fire the ASVAL. I still wouldn't really recommend it. So pretty much you're just not going to hip fire any of these unless you're like right up in their face. As far as bullet velocities go, Cold War ARs are all going to be about the same. They all have that 10% boost from the suppressor, but they were all basically the same at the base value. So 680, that's going to be faster than the SMGs. Very quick bullet velocity for an SMG compared to all the Cold War SMGs, and we'll see that when I take these over there. Then reload times, ASVAL with sleight of hand is going to be really fast. Cold War AK has a really fast reload time. Again, I haven't tested the mag, so I don't have the reload time on here yet. But you can cancel the reload animation as soon as the mag number goes up in the bottom right, and that happens really quickly with the Cold War AK, so you can get a really good reload time there. XM4 and Groza has a little bit better reload time. So of all of these, I think the two that I think come out the best in terms of statistics would be the Groza and the ASVAL. The best ADS times. Cold War AK is very good too. I'm torn between the Cold War AK and the Groza. They're all three great options. I mean, there's just minimal differences in which one I would say is the best. But let's go look at the TTKs and see if that can help us decide a little bit. So we got 250 health, chest shots, no sprint to fire time. Looking at this is chest shots, ASVAL. Obviously, everybody knows ASVAL has insane TTKs. So it just dominates all of these with chest shots, but only with chest shots. We'll see when we swap over shot locations in a second. And it is one of those guns that you can't miss a single chest shot. So you have to hit every single chest shot to get this TTK. Otherwise, it's going to go up by probably like 60 milliseconds or so and be up relatively close to the Cold War AK, but still a little bit faster, I think. But then it's followed by the Cold War AK, this orange line, followed by the Groza, followed by the XM4. If we swap over to stomach, on stomach, ASVAL still wins, still has the fastest TTK of all of these, followed by the XM4, and then followed by the Cold War AK, followed by the Groza. And then extremities, I believe, is exactly the same as stomach. Let's take a look at headshots real fast. Headshots, ASVAL again comes out on top. It also has the most damage range. The ASVAL just shreds, absolutely shreds. It's the fastest TTK gun in the game. If you're playing solos or duos, you should be using the ASVAL as your SMG pretty much, I think, in most cases. There's some situations where including sprint to fire time, an SMG is still going to win. But most of the time, the ASVAL is going to pretty much be your best bet for an SMG in solos and duos. And if you play positioning really well, you can get away with it in trios and quads. I still love using it in trios and quads. But it is difficult with that 30 round mag for sure. So of these, I think it's a tough call. I'm going to take 2 of these to the other chart. One of them is definitely going to be the ASVAL for the TTKs. Cold War AK, everyone knows, makes a great SMG. WARZONE makes a really good SMG now. XM4 is great because it has that 5.56 damage profile. That means that it does the same to chest, stomach, and extremities, so it's just consistent everywhere. I think we're gonna use the Cold War AK. I think the Cold War AK and the ASVAL, because old Cold War AK has great TTKs, which is super important, and it's really accurate now. So we're gonna take both those over there to the SMG chart. Those are what I think are the 2 best SMG assault rifles right now. All right, so I've added what I think are probably the top SMGs in the game right now. The nail gun, the LC10, the PPSH, the MAC-10, MP5 from Cold War. MP5 from Modern Warfare is not on here, but it's similar to the MP5 from Cold War, and it's also a great option. The new buffed Milano, I don't know if that's actually one of the best, but because there's changes to it, I wanted to include it on here so we can talk about that a little bit. And then the AK-74U as well. Again, just because it's a consistent gun, I wanted to put it on here just to compare to these. So this isn't every SMG, and it's not every viable SMG. The balance is really good right now. So we're just going to be looking for any small advantages in here. So we'll start looking at the TTK charts. Obviously, I just talked about the Cold War AK and the ASVAL being the 2 best assault rifles that are potentially usable as SMGs in the current meta. And then we will also compare those to all these SMGs. So this is 250 health chest shots. I'm not going to include sprint to fire for now, but we can do that later. I'm not going to put attachments on the SMGs, but I'm going to leave the SMG attachments on the ARs. I know that doesn't necessarily seem fair, but the goal was just to make these more like a base SMG with what we were doing there. So I think it's okay to do, and it would take me a long time to build all these with all the attachments. So starting with TTKs, the nail gun right off the bat has ridiculous chest TTK, just broken chest TTK, 350 milliseconds. That's followed by the ASVAL in pink, which has much more range than the nail gun, but it has a slower TTK, but it's not like way slower. It's a little bit slower, 50 milliseconds or so. And that's followed by the AK-47 from Cold War and the Cold War MP5. Those are both tied right here. This next line, and then obviously the Cold War MP5 has a much shorter damage range, so it drops off much quicker there. And then the rest of them are pretty much all grouped up. They're all right around the same number. The Milano, talk about the Milano real fast. This is the Milano that I'm toggling. So they removed the 3rd damage drop off in this update. They didn't mention that in the patch notes. They removed the 3rd damage drop off, and it has just significantly buffed damage across the board. But it does have an open bolt delay, which is included. Same with the MAC-10. MAC-10 also has that open bolt delay included. So if we turn that off real quick, so it doesn't always matter. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Milano then takes a little bit of a lead over these other guns, including the MAC-10. And it's closer to like the PPSH here in the light blue PPSH. So it's okay in chest shots, but we'll see when we look at other shot locations that it's not that great still. But it is super accurate, and it has a long damage range now. So let's look at stomach. So if we look at stomach here, nail gun again takes the lead. Obviously the nail gun only has 20 rounds, but it has great TTKs. It literally has the best TTKs of everything in the game right now. It has no open bolt delay. I tested for that, so it only has 20 rounds. You can't put any attachments on it. You can't get sleight of hand or anything, but for solos and duos, it's probably disgusting. I think you can probably get away with it in trios and quads as well, just because it kills so fast. So again, nail gun wins here, followed by the Cold War MP5, followed by the ASVAL. The AK kind of sits in the middle of all of these. I don't think I talked about the AK on chest shots. Let's look at that again. Yeah, I did. It's the same as the Cold War MP5, so it's pretty fast. So looking at stomach, again, it kind of groups up with all these other SMGs like the AK-74U, the LC10, the MAC-10, the PPSH, the Cold War AK are all kind of grouped up in the same area there on stomach shots. Let's go to extremities. Extremities, again, nailgun wins. Nailgun wins everywhere. It has a 17 meter first damage drop off, which is just insane for these TTKs. And it has pretty good bullet velocity too. I think it's too good. It's definitely too good. But that's followed by the AS Val, followed by the Cold War MP5, followed by the AK-47 from Cold War, and then the AK-74U. You can see the Milano on here. Milano's up all the way up. It's the slowest one. So on extremities, Milano still doesn't kill very fast. It's still the slowest. It's okay on chest shots now, but it's not great on anywhere else. So chest shots, Milano is actually pretty good. It's kind of towards the bottom of the pack of Cold War SMGs, but extremities, stomach, Milano is really, really bad still. So these are all updated values. I've updated all the SMGs on the website. The only one that's weird is the AUG. So the Modern Warfare AUG, they said they changed the chest damage multiplier. I tested that for both 9mm rounds and 5.56 in a private match, and we didn't find any difference there. So I don't know what that's about. Either the private match doesn't have the new values yet, or maybe they made a mistake and didn't actually update it. But we're going to work to test that out in a public match. It's just something seems to have changed with skill-based matchmaking, because I can't get in the same lobby as Christina, which is who I usually test with in Plunder anymore. I don't know why that is, but we can't get in the same lobby at all anymore. So that makes it more difficult to test. So we've just been using private lobbies. But for the most part, private lobbies have been matching up perfectly with pubs, so I'm not too worried about that. It's just more annoying to have 24 people to start a match to test anything. But yeah, so that's the summary of the TTKs. Let's look at the summary stats. This is gonna be a lot to go over. But obviously the main thing, most of these stats are gonna be really similar on the right. The one thing that is gonna be different are the AS Val and the Cold War AK, the ARs. They're gonna have worse ADS times, worse sprint to fire times, just because they're ARs, and ARs just always have worse sprint to fire times. Movement as well, they're gonna have a little bit worse movement, especially the AS Val. So a good comparison, I'm thinking the guns that come out on top, in my opinion, based on the TTKs, which I think TTK is super important for SMG fights when you're up close to people. I think TTK is super important. So I think the PPSH is still a top choice. The LC10 actually has really forgiving TTKs, so you can miss chest shots and still get really good TTKs. So that's why the LC10 feels so good, I think. It doesn't look that good on any of the TTK charts, but that's only when you hit every single one of those shots. And if you do some more advanced analysis, which we're hopefully going to bring this to the website eventually, it's just I don't have time to program anymore, unfortunately. But if I can find some time, I want to add a bunch of really advanced features to this that I've been thinking about for literally a year at this point. So hopefully we can add that sometime soon. I don't have any idea. But that's one of the things is like TTK forgiveness, how much you can miss on the shot location and still get that good TTK. And the LC10 is very forgiving. So I think of these SMGs, I think Nailgun, LC10, PPSH are probably my top three. Cold War MP5 obviously is the best if you're inside that 10 meter range. That's where it's going to be the best. But it's just hard to use, has so much recoil that I think these other three are going to be a lot more forgiving. Mac 10 is still really good too. It's just so controllable and has great mobility. So probably these four, Mac 10, PPSH, LC10, Nailgun are the four best. And then the AK and the AS Val are great. But like I said, they're gonna have worse ADS times. They're gonna have worse sprint to fire times, so that it's not always a great option to run those. But they do have more range, and they do have really, really good TTKs. So that's the benefit of using one of these ARs as an SMG. So let's look at the movement of those four guns I just mentioned. So Nailgun, really fast, 5 milliseconds or 5 meters per second. LC10, 4.82. PPSH, 5.03. Mac 10, 5.08. So Mac 10 is the fastest gun in the game, tied with the Milano. PPSH is very fast as well. Nailgun's very fast as well. ADS movement speeds scale roughly with the regular movement speed there. So same. You can just judge them based on that. LC10's a little bit slower. LC10's actually slower than the Cold War AK, and the ADS movement speed of the Cold War AK is a little bit faster than the LC10 as well, and that's because of the Raider stock. Obviously, you can put those attachments on the SMGs as well if you want, and we'll talk about that when I get to the builds. But overall, Nailgun's looking pretty ridiculous. It has slower ADS time, but it's just insane TTKs, great movement. It only has 20 rounds again, but those 20 rounds hit ridiculously hard, so it can take out a lot of enemies even with only 20 rounds. All right, so long video, lots of talking. Quick summary. I think the Cold War AK and the AS Val are the two assault rifles that make the best SMGs right now. They have great TTKs, they have good ADS times, good sprint to fire times, pretty decent movement speeds. AS Val has great hip fire. Cold War AK has horrible hip fire. Not much else to say there. I think the nail gun's kind of busted right now, how good it is, how fast it kills. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why it's so good. And then I think the two top SMGs, probably the LC10, the PPSH. Obviously, like I said, the MAC-10, Cold War MP5 are also great. But let's jump into it and do some recommended builds for these Cold War guns. So obviously nail gun doesn't have any attachments. So we'll focus on LC10, PPSH, MAC-10, and the builds are pretty much all going to be the same because the Cold War attachments are the same between weapons. So we will jump over to that and do that now. All right, so we're going to start with the LC10. So this will be a speed build for the LC10, and these builds can be used for all the different SMGs. It's not just the LC10 that would use this. So all the Cold War SMGs have the same attachments. So Agency Suppressor helps with bullet velocity, damage range, which is nice. Task Force, bullet velocity, damage range, and strafe speed. So this is super nice. Obviously, this hurts your recoil a little bit. So on guns with more recoil, like the PPSH and the Cold War MP5, maybe you don't want to use the Task Force. Maybe use Reinforced Heavy, or if you don't want to slow yourself down, you could even swap out and not even use a barrel. Maybe an optic on the PPSH or the Cold War MP5, just because they don't have as good of iron sights. LC10 has fantastic iron sights. That's one of the big pluses of it. Patrol Grip for sprint speed. This gives like a 7% bonus to sprint speed, which is crazy. Makes the gun super, super fast. LC10 is obviously a little slower to start with, but with the Patrol Grip and the Tiger Team Spotlight, you're going to be zooming. 55 round mag. Obviously, you could get away with a smaller mag if you're playing solos and duos, but if you're playing solos and duos, just use the nail gun. Definitely just use the nail gun. It's ridiculously good. So if we wanted to build this more like a sniper support, I would probably take the barrel off, potentially go with like a bullet velocity barrel or something, because the Cold War SMGs have really, really low bullet velocity. So something to boost your bullet velocity would be really good. And then Field Agent Grip to help with that recoil. And then you can really do whatever you want with the last spot. You could do 5 milliwatt if you want better hip fire. You can still use Tiger Team if you still want to boost that movement speed and make it more like an SMG. You can put an optic on there since it's sniper support. Maybe you want something with a little bit more zoom than iron sights. There's a lot of really good options. It's hard to build these guns too poorly, to be honest. They're just kind of good. And if you mixed up things in a weird way, maybe you could. But I think those would be two really good builds for Cold War SMGs. If you wanted to go full hip fire, if you're somebody that loves hip firing, then Bruiser Grip, 5 milliwatt laser sight for sure. As far as the barrel, probably Task Force still. Probably still Task Force, because strafe speed also works when you are not ADS'd. So the boost in strafe speed will also help your strafe speed when you're not ADSing with the Task Force. And the increase in recoil is not important when you're hip firing. So probably Task Force, Agency, to give you really good damage range, fantastic hip fire. And the Bruiser also helps with the movement speed. So this would be a really highly mobile build as well. And like I said, these work for all the Cold War guns. So you don't just have to... I'm not going to re-show these for the Cold War MP5 and the PPSH and the MAC-10 because they're all the same. They all have the same stats, so we're not gonna show those. And then if you want to see the recommended builds for the AS Val and any of the Cold War ARs, if you want to run those as SMGs, just jump to the AR portion of the video and I talk about the builds that I built there and why I did what I did. But quick summary, I'm gonna be using the nail gun. I think it's insane. TTKs are ridiculous. It's broken. I know it only has 20 rounds, but I'm someone who used the AS Val for a long time and loved it. So the nail gun's just like a even faster killing AS Val to me. And it shoots slower than the AS Val, a lot slower. So 20 rounds is probably similar, if not more damage per mag than the AS Val. So it does have only 20 rounds, but it hits ridiculously hard. So I'm going to be running that as my SMG in most cases, even in trios and quads. If you want something that's just super good all around, really stable, really consistent TTKs, go with the LC10. Another great option for mobility, but also stability and accuracy and consistency is the MAC-10. If you want something that kills super, super fast, Cold War MP5. If you want those extra bullets, if you can't stand the 20 round mag of the of the nail gun or the 30 round mag of the AS-Val. Go with the Cold War MP5 or the Modern Warfare MP5. Both super fast TTKs, fastest of all the SMGs. Modern Warfare MP5, easier to control but worse mobility. Cold War MP5, much more vertical recoil and worse hip fire, but a little bit better mobility and better TTKs. And then PPSH is one of those guns where it has a really good chest TTK compared to the LC10, but if you miss those chest shots at all, it becomes quite a bit slower, and then the LC10 looks like it's really good again. And 95% of the time, you're not going to hit 100% chest shots, but if you want something that has the potential to have that really good chest TTK, then I'd go with the PPSH. And I think that's a pretty good summary. We'll be doing a lot more videos covering AR meta and all of that coming up. This is a really, really long, in-depth video, but I hope you guys all found it useful and informative. And as always, thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.